Good afternoon. I'm Chris Nachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. After years of pushing for action from the families, the search for the remains of two First Nation women who were killed by a Winnipeg serial killer is set to begin today. The remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron are believed to be in the Prairie Green landfill just north of Winnipeg. Premier Wabkanu and Amna Makin, the project management lead for the landfill search, spoke this morning at 11:30 a.m. from the Legislative Building to explain what will happen next. What we do know is that Manitoba has a 5-step plan for the search. One of the steps involves excavation of an area where the remains are believed to be based on GPS mapping. About 140 people applied to work 10-hour shifts from Monday to Thursday and part-time Fridays and Saturdays to search for the remains. The province of Manitoba and the federal government are contributing $20 million each. We will have more on this story for our evening newscast with T.R. Wheatley. 154 years after Louis Riel stopped Canadian surveyors from dividing up Métis land, the Manitoba Metis Federation has become the first Métis group to sign a modern treaty with Canada. The special signing ceremony was held over the weekend on Saturday with Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Gary Anandasangari. The treaty doesn't cover rights like land, health care, child welfare, or fishing and harvesting rights. Chartrand said those parts will need to be negotiated later with the federal government. He said the Métis are the only Indigenous people excluded from federal health benefits, which First Nations people and Inuit receive. Chartrand said he would like to see that change one day. Anandasangari said the treaty won't be done until his government tables a bill. It then needs to be passed by Parliament and given royal assent.
This treaty sets the stone solid. It carves the pathway to ensure and enshrine that our government will be recognized. I am not a group. I am not an organization. I'm not an advocacy group. I am a government. And that's what they need to understand.
The MMF said while they have received support from the Liberals, the NDP, the Greens and the Bloc Québécois, Chartrand has not yet heard from the Conservatives on whether or not they will back the treaty. Our Sierra Bettens will have more for your evening newscast. Police-related deaths remains a topic of discussion this week as 2 more Indigenous people died after being shot by police just 2 days apart in Manitoba, making the national count 13 in total since the end of August. With more, here's APTN's T.R. Wheatley.
Nikki Kumaksiataksak stares at photos on a wall in the Tungasigit Center in the city's north end. She says these Inuit have died in Winnipeg because they had no way of returning north after coming south for medical or judicial issues.
No one able to pick up those pieces for them to go back home.
The wall now includes 24-year-old Jordan Charlie of Taliok Nunavut, who was shot by Winnipeg police on November 24 after they say he stabbed an officer. Charlie was released from jail the week before for a knife-related assault. Before that, he spent time in a prison for another stabbing in the north. Kumaksiataksak says more needs to be done to help Inuit dealing with mental health.
When we build our relationships with our community members, we're hearing these really challenging stories, and we know the barriers that are associated with some of these challenges.
Across the city at a funding announcement for K-12 schools for 5 First Nations, Chief Larson Anderson of Norway House Cree Nation talks about a recent tragedy in his nation involving the RCMP.
It knocks you back down to the days of when the RCMP were first established in this country. We all know that they were here to police First Nation people.
17-year-old Elgin Muskego was shot in Norway House on November 22nd. Police say he had an edged weapon when he approached them. The second police shooting in Manitoba in 2 days. In the past 3 months, the national number rising to 13, with calls for cultural training and even a national inquiry spreading through leaders and activists alike. At the same education announcement, Minister of Indigenous Services Patty Hadju saying it's a complex issue involving all levels of government.
We do have to get to the bottom of this, and how we do that, I think, I can't weigh in today if there needs to be an inquiry or another mechanism. But I can tell you that our government has ongoing and firm commitment to working with First Nations on reforming policing.
Anderson is not a believer of having yet another inquiry.
I would rather see action today. There are reports like AGI, 94 reconciliation documents. I think there's enough studies, there's enough ideas out there that we could take action.
One answer he's convinced on, giving policing back to Indigenous communities because it's those living there that know the answers from their own shared lived experiences. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A court ruling will require the City of Montreal to provide financial compensation to those who have experienced racial profiling. Indigenous and Black people are at the forefront of police street checks in Montreal, with Indigenous people being 6 times more likely to be stopped than a white person. APTN's Savannah Craig has the story.
So I'm looking at placing a client there as part of his release plan. So that's what I'm working on.
Sonia Gagné is a court worker for the Native Parajudicial Services of Quebec.
Enough with the money. Stop throwing money at everything. It's not the solution.
Gagné is reacting to a court decision where the City of Montreal may have to pay up to $5,000 in compensation to anyone who was arrested and $2,500 to anyone who was pulled over or questioned without cause by the Montreal Police between 2017 and 2019. This case highlights racial profiling by police in Montreal, with Black and Indigenous people at the forefront of street checks. Gagné says street checks can end in escalated interactions between officers and Indigenous people.
We've heard stories of just, they got the 13th ticket of the day, and she gets upset and she crumbles it and she throws it at the police officer, hits his bulletproof vest and falls to the floor. It's a crumbled up ticket. It's a piece of paper. It's on carbon paper even, it's thin. Not making excuses, but the point is they get charged with assault. It's escalating for no reason. There's no dialogue.
Researchers say Indigenous people are 6 times more likely to be stopped by the police than a white person.
And all the results show that these disparities.
And Indigenous women are 11 times more likely to be stopped by police than white women.
Indigenous women are heavily targeted.
One of those researchers is Massimiliano Malone. He was employed by the Montreal Police to do a report on police street checks.
They said to us that we are targeting Indigenous people, but Indigenous people are overrepresented in the homeless people in Montreal. And so when we do intervene, it's not because they're Indigenous, it's because they are homeless.
Malone says the Montreal Police view street checks on homeless people as an important tool to provide assistance to them.
And Wissoskin has a lot of different programs where they do gatherings with family.
Gagné says the best way to help is to provide treatment centers for those experiencing mental illness, addiction, and offer programs for perpetrators of sexual violence. She calls cultural and intergenerational trauma training of police a band-aid solution.
It can't be always training in an office setting with, coffee and donuts, and it can't always be like that. And they really need to see firsthand where these people are coming from. They need to see the dynamics, how families work, how communities communicate, and how they work.
The City of Montreal will be appealing parts of this case, including the way compensation is calculated for victims of racial profiling. Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Montreal.
2 youth centers in Edmonton have been assisting the community more than ever this year, and this week there will be a fundraiser to help them keep up with the growing demand. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
Since 1981, Youth Empowerment and Support Services has helped youth ages 15 to 24 in crisis by offering a wide range of support services with 24/7 intake. Corey Moles is the president and CEO of Yes.
Even if that's a place to stay, warm meal, some clothing, and then we figure out what to do next. We assess them holistically. We have a medical clinic on site. We have mental health experts on site.
And more youth are in need of their services. They have helped 897 youth this year so far, and they are relying on donations to continue the work they do. This upcoming Tuesday, they are holding a fundraiser. It's important that funds are donated, as this can make up 50% of their funding.
Giving Tuesday is an important day of the year for us. We're doing a match program with EPCOR, where they will match all new and increased donations up to $25,000.
Moles says the Canada Post strike has impacted donations that come by mail. He says, yes, we'll go to each house and pick up donations in person.
So every donation actually counts, no matter how small. We have a lot of people saying, oh, I don't know how much to give, or I can't give a lot. But this time of year, it's even more important because it's cold outside and the youth really need our help.
The Bissell Center helps individuals and families. Their programs offer a wide variety of help, from temporary and permanent housing to clothing and food. Chris Sheeman says demand is ever increasing.
Since July 2023, we've seen a 22% increase in demand. This is largely for our essentials. So this is things like diapers, formula, all those essentials you need for raising a happy and healthy family. Even our calls for support have been increasing wildly. Just for an example, last month we had about 182 calls and emails looking for support. And this month it's been well over 260 calls.
Bissell is taking part in Giving Tuesday with a fundraiser. They have helped over 500 families this year.
We're reaching out to the larger Edmonton community, hoping to raise funds from them. We know we can always depend on Edmontonians to support when we make a call.
EPCOR, an Edmonton-owned utility company, is also matching donations up to $25,000 for Bissell Center. Both the fundraisers begin on Tuesday, December 3rd. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Indigenous Services Canada has recently committed to building 5 K-12 schools in First Nations in northern Manitoba. That story when we come back. Welcome back. A commitment to build 5 K-12 schools in First Nations in northern Manitoba was recently announced by Indigenous Services Canada. The funds will come from Budget 2024, where $545 million was committed over 3 years to go toward learning spaces for First Nation students across the country. Minister Patty Haidu, along with leaders from Ochichako-Sipi, Norway House, the Taskiak, Opipon Napawin, and Garden Hill came together at Red River College in Winnipeg to share the news. All projects are currently in various stages. 2 are undergoing feasibility studies, 1 is in design phase, 1 will get renovations to its existing school, and 1 is in the construction phase. Shirley Descharmes is chief of Ochichako-Sipi, the community where construction for a school and accommodations for teachers will soon begin. She says the roof had collapsed in April of last year for the previous school in her community.
We are finally going to be feeling safe for our children because, as stated, education is such an important future for our generations to come. We rely on these young people as they are trying to learn. We rely on them that they are the future leaders.
To Australia now, where class action lawsuits have been launched against 2 state governments over the removal of First Nations children from their families by child protection authorities. The legal action accuses the governments of widespread racial discrimination in what's been labeled as a modern-day generation of stolen children. NITV's Danny Rennie reports.
Lawyers lodged the class action with the federal court last month on behalf of families in Western Australia and New South Wales. The firm accuses both state governments of unlawful and unjust removal of First Nations children from their families and cultural ties.
The conduct of the department is racially discriminatory, and it's in the way that they're intervening with First Nations families, in the way that they're removing children, the placement of children in out-of-home care, and then the failure to reunify the children with their families afterwards.
She says Western Australia and New South Wales have some of the highest rates of child removal in the country, but hasn't ruled out expanding the legal action to include other states.
There's been so many reports and so many inquiries done on the overrepresentation of First Nations children in the out-of-home care system. And is there something that can be done about this from a class actions perspective? Because all of the reports and recommendations have said the same thing, but there hasn't been a change other than an upwards trend in the number of children that are taken into out-of-home care.
It comes as a new report by the Secretariat of National Aboriginal and Islander Childcare, points to a funding shortfall of Indigenous-controlled child welfare organisations. SNAIC's annual Family Matters report found those agencies only receive 6% of government funding, despite First Nations children making up 41% of children in out-of-home care.
Early interventions and the investment into those early interventions are crucial recommendations that will provide tangible outcomes.
The report also found First Nations children continue to be overrepresented in all stages of the child protection system nationally and are 10 times more likely to be removed and placed in care.
We can do this. We need to move past despair and into hope and ambition and really put in place those steps that change the trajectory for our children and keep our communities safe.
Dan Rennie, NITV News.
And here are the results for last week's APTN News web poll questions. Over at our website, we had asked, do you think there should be more severe consequences for people who falsely claim Indigenous identity to access benefits? 85% voted yes, 6% saying no, and the rest were unsure at 9%. Our next question was, do you think the GST holiday is an effective way to address cost of living concerns? 63% voted not effective at all, 25% saying somewhat effective, 11% were unsure, and 1% thought it was very effective. And lastly, we had asked, do you think band councils should have the authority to evict people from their community for violence or drug offenses? A majority voted yes at 68%, 14% voted no, and 18% were unsure. Thank you to everyone who voted. Stay tuned for our next set of questions at www.aptnnews.ca. Award-winning Cree classical singer Rhonda Head from Opaskwayak Cree Nation is up next to tell us about her latest achievements, including her work being recognized by the Grammys. That interview when we come back. Starting on the east, St. John's 4, Charlottetown 3. Happy Valley, Goose Bay 0, La Grande River -2. Saguenay 2, Gaspé 2. Toronto 1, Peterborough 1 as well. Sudbury -2, Wawa -2. -7 in Churchill, Puckatawagan -15. -14 in Gimli, Princess Harbour -10. -22 in Regina, Saskatoon -27. Meadow Lake -23, La Ronge -20. High Level -19, Peace River 1. -5 in Red Deer, Edmonton 2. 1 in Kamloops, Campbell River 6. -5 in Smithers, Dees Lake -10. Old Crow at -35 in Sun, Rock River -23. -18 in Wati, Wrigley -24. -31 in Inuvik, Polituck -18. -26 in Baker Lake, Cambridge Bay, same temperature -26. And Clyde River -21, Arctic Bay -20. It's been a huge couple of weeks for Opaskwayak Cree Nation's Rhonda Head. The mezzo-soprano vocalist from northern Manitoba recently found out she is featured on an album that is up for a Grammy Award. And this past weekend, she performed for her third time at the famed Carnegie Hall in New York City. Rhonda joins us now from an airport in New York City. Here she is. Rhonda, congrats on all the big news. Thank you for chatting with us today. Let's start with this past weekend. You performed at New York City's famed Carnegie Hall, a stage you have played before, but this time you weren't alone. How did it go?
The performance was excellent. It was so exciting to be on the stage. I traveled with 4 Indigenous youth, and we've been preparing since September for that 1.5 hour show, and it was so magical. And I was so nervous. It wasn't about me this time; it was about the youth, and I was so excited for them, and it was just incredible. And the venue so beautiful, and their parents were in the crowd, and it's just really wonderful. And I can't even explain how exciting and so thankful for everyone that helped us out and supported us. And we got invited back next year.
Nice. It sounds like a very memorable weekend. What do you think it meant for the youth who performed with you?
Oh, I think the experience was so incredible. I believe it was life-changing for them. We were all, every time we went out to our dress rehearsal, and when we first got there, before we went out onto the performance stage, we all said a prayer, to give us strength, and very thankful to be invited to perform on that stage. And we're going to continue to mentor the 4 youth that attended, and I think it's just it was so surreal too. Even for the parents, it was surreal, and it was just so you could see it in their eyes, their sparkle in their eye, and they got empowered by performing in one of the most famous venues in the world, and that's one of the venues where artists, musicians want to play, and it's a beautiful venue. Acoustics are amazing. The organizers of Distinguished Concerts of New York and the maestro, they just absolutely embraced us, and they loved us, and like I said, they invited us back next year.
That's so great. And your other big news is that you recently found out an album you contributed to is up for a Grammy Award. What is it like to get that news?
Well, I found out on November 9, his name is Antonio Vergara, and the album's called The Fury. And I listened to the announcement because I'm part of the Recording Academy, and I also vote. So when I found out the album, The Fury, got nominated for Best Contemporary Blues Album, I immediately reached out to him and congratulated him. I was so excited. And he's like, well, Rhonda, you're part of the album too. You should be celebrating with me. And I didn't realize that everyone that was involved in the album also got a Grammy nomination. So I didn't find out till 2 days later when he sent out the marketing material, and he told us to change the name of the artist to my name. So I did, and it says Rhonda Head, Grammy nominee. I'm like, what? Oh my God.
Rhonda, you've also attended the Grammys in the past, and you even brought an Every Child Matters flag onto the red carpet. Will this time be a little different for you?
I think it will be. I think it's just going to be about me this time. I also brought the Winnipeg Jets flag there, and I love the Winnipeg Jets, and I'm very passionate about the Every Child Matters movement. But I think this time it's going to be about me and being able to enjoy walking on that red carpet without carrying extra stuff in my purse.
Well, that's great, Rhonda. We'll have to leave it there. I thank you so much for your time, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors in your career.
Thank you very much. Like I said.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Monday, December 2nd. We'll be back again in a few hours with your evening newscast. Make sure to join us then. From everyone at APTN National News, miigwech, hai hai, kwana. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again. Ekse.